Yes, today we are having Ryan Grimm, who is one of the founders of progressive investigative news platform Dropsite News. And we will talk about Epstein files, public expectation, foreign ties discussions of Epstein and his criminal network in general. Thank you, Ryan, for joining to Halk TV today.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
What are the people curious about? Who is this man? How did he make this money? And how he circulated around the world's most powerful and richest people?
He was, the more we learn about him, the more shocking it becomes just how embedded he was in this set of extraordinarily powerful people who, through their access to, through their positions of like political power, whether they're secretaries of state or presidents or prime ministers, or through their positions in corporate America or on tops of foundations or just being billionaires themselves, effectively run the world. And Jeffrey Epstein was somebody that moved in and out of this, within this circle, which is concentrated kind of in the Upper East Side of Manhattan, with an unusual amount of fluidity and grace. And that was despite his conviction, in the 2000s for underage prostitution, which is we can talk about that. It's a contradiction in terms, in fact, and remained embedded in these power structures up until the day he died.
How come they couldn't have not noticed the abuse network, or did they? And that he was a convicted felon, yet they are still around him asking advice. Why?
I think if you have to think about how all of his friends and colleagues in that same social circle got to where they are. There's a saying that says behind every great fortune is a great crime. So some of those, fortunes that allowed people to be operating at Epstein's level had been created by some crime in the past. A lot of them were being created by ongoing crimes that were happening at the moment. These are people who, through decisions that they make, are responsible for extraordinary amounts of suffering and violence around the world. In other words, if you're sitting there in a room with say, Henry Kissinger, who are you to judge the morality of the other people in the room? So Chomsky is one of the more striking and surprising figures to have emerged in these documents. Up until now, it had been people who were supporters of Chomsky, fans of Chomsky, or even friends of Chomsky. I'm somebody who has admired him, my entire life. Getting to spend some time with him and meet him has been among the most rewarding times that I've been able to spend. People like us have been able to say, well, he's raising money for MIT. Jeffrey Epstein is a big donor to MIT. It's not as if they were like best friends or anything. Now their emails have emerged where Chomsky is helping him, think about how to navigate the bad press that he's getting because of the sexual abuse allegations. At the time that he's sending those emails, 2019, it's utterly indefensible. The Miami Herald by then had exposed the extent, maybe not the full extent of his abuse, but enough of the extent of the abuse that it would have been it was known to regular people, not set aside people who were who are following the news very closely, like somebody like Noam Chomsky. I have no capacity to explain what on earth he's doing. Now, it doesn't mean that he was participating in the perversion
I'll ask about that, about other people as well. Yeah. You are coming from investigative journalism background, and when more than 3 million documents were released, the last batch, let's say, the criminal network and all the ethical disaster became public. What would you consider today important to investigate?
Who was he working for? Like, that remains to be And who was he working with? Those remain the key questions. And were those relationships the reason why he was able to get away with so much of what he was able to get away with for so long? We've done reporting over at Dropside News that has linked him to the Israeli state in a number of different ways.
Let's dive deeper then. Is there any evidence showing that he worked for Israel or CIA? And what does Israeli former PM Ehud Barak was staying at his apartment in New York mean in this context, for example?
I think that there's sort of an outdated idea that people have that, well, there are certainly some people who are official Israeli spies. There are some people who are official Israeli agents, and people are looking for that. I think that Epstein more accurately probably fits into the category of what you would call an asset, somebody who is useful and used by the state of Israel, somebody who, and it seems like also elements of the American intelligence infrastructure. But then he is also able to use elements of the Israeli intelligence community for his own particular ends, or to further, say, cyber weapons projects that evolved out of the Israeli intelligence community. So it's not as if he was kind of punching the clock as an Israeli spy. Like, that doesn't seem to be what he was doing. But he was very friendly with powerful people who were part of the Israeli kind of global spy network, and that opens particular doors, and that was a route to a significant amount of his wealth and power. That we know for sure.
And today, Washington Post says Epstein built ties to Russians as well, and he sought to meet Putin. And what do the Justice Department files show about him seeking help from a Russian official after claiming that a woman from Moscow was blackmailing powerful businessmen in New York?
He certainly had relationships with powerful Russian figures, and met with Putin. That's a fact. What the Western press is trying to do, it seems like, is create a narrative that tells the public, okay, your impression, your guess that this guy was a spy or was involved or had, friends in very powerful places, that was correct. And we were wrong to call it a conspiracy theory, and we're sorry for that. But look over there. It's Russia that he has the relationship with. The UK is going, full blast. The UK press is going full blast with this, as I'm sure you've seen, with this argument. It's only, the Washington Post now has some UK editors. I don't know if some of the tabloid guys.
What does that mean?
They're British. Like, they're literally.
Yeah, like I see, but why do you say this?
Well, so now the Washington Post is like kind of dipping its toes in the waters of, well, okay, maybe this is a Russian guy. Maybe this is a Russian situation, which obscures then the fact that he had much more important relationships with Israeli intelligence and U.S. intelligence. In fact, one of the articles that we did at Dropsite revealed that Epstein played a role in setting up a back channel between Israel and Russia during the Syrian civil war. And so, yes, he set up this back channel to Russia, and that involved using his Russian connections, but he did it on behalf of Israel. And so the U.S. media is going to try to cover developments like that by talking about one part of the elephant, but not the other part of the elephant, and will wind up, I think, confusing things more than
clarifying. Let's look at
things.
What does Prime Minister Netanyahu say here. He says that his unusual close relationship with Barak doesn't suggest Epstein worked for Israel, and he says it proves opposite. Do you agree with that? And also, did Barak work with anti-Zionist left in Israel, as Netanyahu claimed, and after leaving the Labour Party, he worked with left? We know that, but does this mean Barak was anti-Zionist to you?
So we at Dropsite also did a story about Epstein connecting bankers at J.P. Morgan with Netanyahu to finance the Leviathan gas deal. So Epstein did not only and exclusively work with Barak. It is true that they were very tight for many decades. The idea that Barak is some anti-Zionist figure is comical. he's a Zionist, but he's part of the. It's true that he's part of the Labor Party faction, and it's true that the Labor Party faction are often in conflict with the Likud faction over there. Like that's all true, but Ehud Barak.
Does him being leaked say anything?
Barak?
Only Israeli being hurt, in other words.
No, it is interesting that Netanyahu's opponents often seem to be the ones that take the biggest brunt. But no, it's also a fact that Barak was one of the closest allies that Epstein had in that world, as far as we can tell. So that's true. But Barak, despite not being in the government, and yet despite losing election, remained extremely close to top intel officials throughout his life. And remains so today. And
Epstein advised him to work with Palantir to make more money after him being out of the government. That's another thing. Do you have anything to say on that before I skip the Congress part?
No, that's true. Ehud Barak, one of his legacies will be helping to significantly expand Israel's cyber weapons industry around the world. And he and Epstein did that together and played a key. Epstein was a key figure in it.
Another benefactor, Les Wexner, he expected for House oversight deposition on February 18, and we know that Clinton's accepted to participate at another hearing. What results should Americans expect from these depositions hearing from the Congress?
Maybe Congress is holding on to some interesting information that we'll see unveiled at that time. Usually, we don't get much beyond theatrics in the way, from these hearings. So I wouldn't expect there to be much edification going on.
I'll come back here when I ask about President Trump, but let's continue with Clinton's. Hillary Clinton called James Comer, House Oversight Committee Chairman, who is a Republican, to have discussion in public, cameras on. And President Trump showed empathy for Clinton. He said that it's a shame. I always liked Bill. Hillary is very capable. How do you view this?
They should do it in public. I think, let the public see it. And I think it's good that the Clintons stopped trying to resist the subpoena. A lawfully issued subpoena from Congress has to be followed. How about
Trump being empathetic here?
Trump, it's also hard to know what to make of Trump. How much of his mind is even still there? Is it true that Trump has always kind of had sympathy for the Clintons? Yeah, I think so. Like they were part of the same social scene, I think, and they see themselves. He sees them as similar figures to him, and I think that they should reflect on that. Like if Trump looks at you and sees a common soul, then that's something you want to sit with for a minute.
And Trump never visited Little St. James Islands of Epstein based on the logs, while logs showed Bill Clinton did. Does visiting islands show any kind of wrongdoing? And given that President Trump always reminds that nothing came about me, only for Clintons.
I think it does, because I think people knew what went on there, and I think people knew what Jeffrey Epstein's reputation was. I'm not aware of any evidence that Clinton visited the island. I know there's some claims from people, but there's never been any flight logs or other evidence and he denies it, that would suggest that he was.
Did you specifically investigate this?
They have, yeah, and nobody has found any travel logs that would put him there, and his whereabouts as a post-president are pretty well known. Like you can pinpoint day to day, in general where he was.
How did these files affected President Trump's voter base in terms of midterms?
Yeah, Republicans are furious at Trump for the way he's handling the release of the Epstein files, and he's getting the worst of all worlds, because he looks like he's being dragged into releasing them, and at the same time, they're still coming out. So he's not getting, he's taking all the political pain for no gain.
And do you expect any change in the Congress after the election?
I think Democrats will win the House. And it's increasingly now, this is if the elections are fair, they don't steal the election machines. I think the election is going to be pretty catastrophically marred with irregularities.
If that happens, should we expect President Trump to be tried and impeached again?
No. Well, impeachment here is a bit of a distraction anyway, because you need 67 votes, as you know, in the Senate to convict on impeachment, and getting that many Republicans.
Midterms will not change that much, you mean?
No.
I see. And many people, including Elon Musk, says that they didn't have a relationship with Epstein and it turned out wrong. That was the focus of US media, especially print newspaper this week all the time. Many kept seeing or talking to him over the emails after this conviction from the very beginning. What is your reaction to that?
This has exposed a ton of men who said they had nothing to do with Epstein as liars and depraved perverts.
Did anyone in the US other than Maxwell being charged with abuse and sex trafficking in this network? And where are the clients? Any justice to victims? And does regret means anything for the victims?
Maxwell's the only one that's faced any accountability. And there's a lot of infighting among victims over who was a genuine victim and who was actually participating in the exploitation, because Maxwell was participating in the exploitation, and the argument is that some of these other victims were also recruiting women and participating in the exploitation rather than themselves being exploited. And so there's that infighting going on. There's some shame and some other accountability that's being brought to some people, but
what kind of accountability? Like Prince Andrews?
Peter Attia, getting pushed out of his organization, people losing jobs.
Is this justice in a criminal manner?
Mendelsohn might go to jail. Yeah. But so far we don't have a client list. We don't have, we're not.
Only regret messages.
Some and other.
Or talking to him, being in touch.
Or denial messages. Yeah. Yeah.
And do we know how many people, young boys or girls, have been trafficked by these people?
I don't know, but it's many, many, many.
Were the many of them American or from Balkans or Eastern Europe or any
plenty of Americans, but many from around the world too.
And how do you view his death after an anonymous prison employee claimed on 4chan that he was removed from the jail in Iran before his death was announced?
There's that. There's the...
and a federal grand jury actually subpoenaed the tech company, the 4chan, to try to identify that poster.
Right. There's that. So now it's been pretty well confirmed that was a real guard. We've got evidence that video shows potentially somebody going into a cell at around 10:30
Orange shaped object moving.
Orange shaped object moving. And we've got the rope that was found that they said was used to strangle him. Turns out not to have been what was used.
What does it tell to us?
It tells to us that the suspicions that he was murdered continue to take on more and more credibility.
Do you expect deeper investigation on this?
No.
Why?
Because they're...
And how? What does it tell to the world about U.S. justice?
Why would if it happened under the Trump administration? So why would the Trump administration look into its own murder of Epstein if it was indeed a murder?
Why didn't Biden administration look?
So there's a lot of questions about why they did so many different things wrong. And some of the answers are the same. It's just pure incompetence. Separately, the case against Maxwell was ongoing for most or all of the Biden administration. And so that was their excuse for not releasing more of the documents, because then they would have had a mistrial with Maxwell.
Do you expect her being released in exchange for staying silent during this administration?
Anything's possible at this point, that's for sure.
And do you think she'll stay silent if they don't release her?
I don't know. I don't know what I would do if I were her. I'm sure she's quite scared.
I mean, to stay alive?
Yeah.
I see. And last question, it's not about Epstein. And as a left-leaning, or should I call progressive outlet, you and your outlet have gained access to the White House press corps pool recently. How did that happen, and what are the reactions, especially over your coverage with Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and given that you interviewed some of the leaders of Hamas?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Internally, we always tell our colleagues that we are not actually a left-wing or progressive news institution. we're a news organization. We, the founders and some of the other members, we have our own individual politics, but we're a news organization first. And I think getting welcomed into the pool is a reflection of, to be honest, the level of kind of readership that we have across the board. We're not only read by left-wingers or liberals. We have a lot of independents and conservatives who read our news. And so I think the White House recognized that. And
who is going to be your White House reporter in this case following?
That'll be me. And yeah, so Laura Loomer lost her mind over it. She's a activist and journalist here in the United States, and has been critical of us in the past. And I guess she wasn't invited into the pool, which that's not my fault.
She was at Pentagon.
She should take that up with the White House. Once. Yeah. What's that?
She was at Pentagon once during the first.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. And so whatever, the pool that we were invited into, I used to be in the White House pool under Obama.
As the website news?
Through Huffington Post. And then we never joined. When I was at the Intercept, we never joined the Intercept. But as you know, that's a pool that's run by the White House Press Association, the Correspondents Association, whereas the new media pool is basically run by the White House decides who comes in and out of that one, which I think it's probably.
Can you say somehow they extended the coverage to more outlets?
They certainly have extended it to more outlets. They've allowed in a lot of independent and eccentric, a lot of eccentric outlets, and
same for foreign outlets as well. Thank you very much, Ryan, and hope to see you at White House.
I'll see you there.